Well, all right, kiddos, it's time to sharpen up those edges and grease up your chains. We are going to live it up with mountain life. Dropping in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Well, all right. What's up, mountain lifers, mountain lovers, children of the natural realm? This is Feet Banks coming back at you, living it up with mountain life, another podcast. Jon Turk is on the show today. Jon's a scientist, an adventurer, a writer, a skier, a mountain biker, and one of the most interesting people I've ever had the good fortune to meet and to befriend. And we're going to get to Jon later on, but for now, what about you? How are you doing? What's going on in your life? It feels like there's a lot of forces out there trying to divide us these days. In economy versus environment, protesters versus jobs, community health versus personal freedoms, city folk versus country folk, noobs versus veterans, kooks versus core, cancel culture, science, religion, vegans, rednecks, blue bloods, lizard people. I got a friend who tried to tell me the Smurfs are white supremacists. And it's a grind, man. All this information, all this, complex clashing of opinions and viewpoints. People are getting squirrely. People are getting stressed. The media isn't helping in this clickbait, headline-based ecosystem of news and information. Social media isn't necessarily helping either. In some ways, it's keeping us better informed, showing us things we may not ever be exposed to otherwise. In other ways, it's the same old thing, putting people into silos, into echo chambers, building distrust and disenfranchisement. And the government, I don't know. From where I'm sitting, I understand it's impossible to balance everything and do the right thing for everyone. And you can please some of the people some of the time, but you can't please all the people all the time. I get it. It's a hard job. But I don't think the government even thinks of people as people anymore. I think they just play the numbers. People are too complex, too diverse. The government boils us down to digits, to numbers, and they play them, which makes sense on a logical level, but that isn't the way humanity operates. It was Plato, I believe, who said the highest form of knowledge is empathy, because it comes from a place where we have to step outside of our own thoughts, get away from our ego, from our ideas, from our own experiences, and see what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes and dig into somebody else's stories. And that isn't always easy to do, but it feels like it's important, especially nowadays, because we all have different stories on some level and similar ones on another. And a lot of the stories we hear or we tell or we live, some of them are being put there by maybe nefarious forces, by people or politicians, marketers, villains. Some of the stories we're told and the ones we tell ourselves in our big brains, some of them might not be all that great for us in the long run, in what's left of the long run anyhow. And this idea of stories, of course, is front and center in Jon Turk's new book, Tracking Lions, Myth, and Wilderness in Samburu. I read the book. I printed it out. Jon sent me a PDF because the actual book wasn't out yet. But I read it, and I liked it. I'm already a huge Turk fan, but this book really got my mind swirling. It's part anthropology, part adventure, part science, part mysticism, part brain, part heart, and all natural good reading. And some lions as well, some lions. So, it's worth noting, this is the first pod I've ever recorded on via Zoom. Jon is 76 years old. He lives in the bush in Montana. He's kind of got dodgy Wi-Fi. The borders have been closed most of the summer, and we wanted to get this pod done. Zoom was the only option. So there were some glitches. I tried to edit them out as best I can. The connection isn't always there. Apologies if you can notice the edits. I would blame the technology team. I'd blame the editors, the producer, but none of those people exist. It's just me sitting in a room with bubble wrap stuck on the walls down here in Squamish, British Columbia, about 5 kilometers from the ocean, underneath a couple of really nice-looking mountains, and on the traditional territory, unceded territory, of the Squamish Nation and lands. It's just me and Jon Turk's voice, talking stories, telling stories, and getting into it. Here we go. Okay, excellent. So here we are. The technology is working for us, and we've got Jon Turk live from Montana. Jon, how's it going? How's your summer been down there?
Yeah, it's been great. We just got into fire season, so that's a little whatever, but a lot of bike riding. It's been good. How about you, Feet?
Yeah, it's about the same, and we had that crazy heat wave earlier in the summer where we were posting basically Death Valley temperatures in the interior British Columbia this summer, which I think for someone like you who's spent a lot of your life talking about and thinking about global warming, it feels like it's hard to deny that that's a thing right now.
Well, it's scary. As I said in my new book, 30, 40 years ago, I said this sort of thing is theoretically possible to maybe happen sometime in the distant future. And now I'm saying it is happening right now as we speak.
Yeah, yes, it certainly looks like it. It seems hard to deny. You mentioned the new book. So the book's called Tracking Lions, Myth and Wilderness in Samburu. And this is I think I read your 35th book, if you include textbooks. Is that true?
Yeah, about that. I lose track. But yeah, about 30 textbooks, maybe a few more, and 5 adventure books.
Sure. And this one, it felt almost like a bit of a hybrid between the two. I feel like, as an adventure story, it seemed to have a bit more, a hard science or a culmination of all your other work compared to some of your earlier pieces.
Yeah, Fee, thank you for that. It's the book I really wanted to write 50 years ago, which is to talk about the problems we have on a scientific way, but at the same time to wrap it into a story that makes people want to turn the next page, that makes people enjoy the read, but at the same time imparts some real and critical information about what's going on the planet today.
Yeah, and there's a lot in the book about sort of the history of human civilization, and you're there in Africa, with this, I would say, at least lesser contacted culture, and there's lions, and it's a big difference from what people are used to over here in North America. Was being there in Africa, was that a natural thing for you to just start looking back over the millennium that have passed and the way that humans have come to this point, or did you already have that in your mind before you went there?
A little of both, but the key thing is on day 3 in Samburu, I was asked to help track a lion. And one of the guys at the camp where I was at hands me a wooden club, a piece of wood. And he says, "Do you know how to kill a lion with a club if a lion charges you with a wooden club?" And I go, "Yeah, no, I never learned that in kindergarten. My mother never taught me how to stop a lion with a wooden club." And so he gives me a little lesson: jump up sideways, avoid the claws, hit it on the side of the neck, and blah, blah, blah. And then I'm off in the savannah walking along with this club, and we're on a lion track, and the tracks are really fresh. We're minutes or an hour behind the lion. And I get to thinking, how did people survive on the savannah when they're weak and slow and don't have strong claws or teeth, and they're armed with a wooden club, and they're dealing with lions? And it makes me look back into the distant past, into the anthropology, and try to examine what gave us the power to survive.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like you have definitely looked that direction in some of your other books when you're, trying to trace an old mariner route, across the Pacific, or you're, paddling up rivers in Papua New Guinea and stuff. But it feels like with this book, you really sort of broadened that approach to look almost at all of human history, or a sample of from all different points, rather than sort of your other books were more specific to one region.
Yeah, and thank you for that. Thank you for seeing that. It's my last book. I wanted to kind of hopefully, we're all arrogant and proud of ourselves, but in a way I wanted to write a book that encompassed not a specific region or a specific tribe, but the condition of humankind. And those are broad words, but if you wrap it in a story, hopefully it'll work.
Jon, you mentioned this is your last book, and you mentioned that in the book. Did you know this would be your last book going in, and how does it feel? Saying, okay, after this many books, I'm out. I'm tapping out with this one.
Well, we'll see. The last book before the last book I said was the last book, so I'm not a politician. If I lie in the future, just call me a liar, but don't hit me on the head.
We've known each other a while. You've been writing for the magazine for a few years, and we hosted you up at the Multiplicity live show up in Whistler. And one of the things I remember from one of your talks at the Multiplicity was talking about the moment. And you come back to that in this book about, feel this moment. You'll never be here again. Has that, when did you sort of tap into that way of thinking? I know it's a lot more common now, flow state and being in the moment, and it's almost like a buzzword. But I know even when I was a kid, people didn't really talk that way. So what was the journey like for you? How old were you, and when did that kind of happen, where you really started to understand the value of the moment?
Oh, you're an adventurer, Feet. Sometime in the distant past, the first time you scare the living bejesus out of yourself, and you put yourself in a situation where, oh my God, I could be dead in the next 5 seconds or the next 10 seconds. And you put yourself that intentionally, and then you get there and you say, oh my gosh, I'm here. I'm in that moment where I could be dead in the next 5 seconds. And then all of a sudden, you feel your whole body focus in on the now. Now, it's a harsh way to do it. I mean, if you were any good at meditation, you could do it without jumping off a cliff or whatever.
Yeah.
But this is the way people like us do it. So you find yourself in that situation and you go, oh, I have to focus completely on what I do in the next 10 nanoseconds so that I'll be alive 5 seconds from now. And you get this amazing clarity. And then, wow, that was cathartic. That cleaned me out. That was an instant in time when the stories were gone from my head, when I was no longer this person enslaved by my think too much, know it all brain. And that was wondrous. And then you start reading that this is what great teachers have been teaching for many, many centuries, and it all comes together.
Yeah, I think you're right. A certain type of people, I remember, as a young kid, we would just climb to the very, very top of the tallest tree we could find. Climb as high in a tree as you can and be swaying there in the wind. And that would be, before we started skiing or being able to jump off cliffs or whatever. That was how we would get there. And I feel like we didn't even really know why we were doing that, other than, and you say it in the book, just to see what happens, right? And then I guess maybe that sets a bit of a course for people like us that lead these adventurous lives. But it's definitely, it seems like a more popular or a better understood concept nowadays, where people almost can they know what they're getting into and why they're doing it. Whereas it feels like in the old days, we sort of just did these things and didn't think that much about it.
Yeah, but it became addictive. And the thing is that, and what I try to talk about in Tracking Lions is that somewhere along the line, we became a storytelling people. Mm-hmm. And stories are important for survival for many, many reasons. I talk about it in the book. But for example, stories are predictions. So we see a form moving in the bushes and we can't identify it, but we tell ourselves a story. Oh, the last time I saw a form like that moving in the bushes, it was a lion. So this time it might also be a lion. And then those kinds of stories are obviously help us survive. But then our stories get wacky, and we start enlarging our stories and talking about things that don't matter. And then we drive ourselves crazy. So the game here is to keep the stories alive when they help us and shut the stories off when they're a downright pain in the neck. And that's the balance we try to play, okay?
Yeah, and that's been, you say that's sort of been something that's been going on almost as long as there's been civilized humanity.
And before civilized humanity.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, storytelling is such a huge part of this book. And you mentioned, like you just said, it's our strength. It's what's been able to bond tribes together so that they could survive over a common story, or whether it's a creation myth or whether it's whatever. And then also, wars are started by stories, and we can we can storytell ourselves out of doing things. And I guess in this book, when you're talking about living in the moment and those moments where there is no story, where it's almost instinct, it's interesting that to get the most out of life, we almost seem to be going back towards the animal kingdom, where, does the lion have a story that it tells itself every day, or does it just be?
Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure the lion tells fewer stories than we do. And it's just our brains have gotten away from us. And they're handy sometimes. I say in the book, I wouldn't go to the mailbox without my brain. But they really get in the way by creating a narrative that doesn't exist. And the thing I love about nature, the thing I love certainly about doing dangerous things in nature, is that existence just is. And we don't get to tell ourselves a story about an existence, an imaginary existence. And you go out into nature, let's take away the danger element. Let's sit in a canoe with me, or I'll sit in a canoe with you for 3 weeks, going down a flat river, no rapids, no storms, no nothing. By the end of the first day, our stories will start to diminish. By the end of the 3 weeks, we'll be living in a different headspace. That's so beautiful. And people ask me to give these workshops where I'm supposed to replicate that feeling in 4 hours. Well, I can't do it. I'm not good enough. The nature will do it, but you got to give it time. And nature is like a big sponge. It cleans us out. And 1 day is better than 1 hour. 5 days is better than 1 day, and so on and so forth. But that's the lesson. If people want to take one lesson from the book, from Tracking Lions, it's that nature will clean us out and give us a purity.
Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if, for this book, you were over there in Africa, essentially by yourself. You had friends and guides, and there was the woman that runs the camp you're at that was sort of in and out. But throughout your books, it seems like some of them you're alone, and then lots of times you are with a partner. For this book, was it beneficial to you to just be out there on the savannah? Essentially, in some parts of the book, you are out there walking around totally alone. Does it make it easier to get where you need to be mentally when you're by yourself, or is it good to have a partner?
Well, I'm a married man, so that's a loaded question.
In these sorts of adventures,
yeah, it's really great to be alone. My first great adventure, I did totally solo. At one point, I was a month, 29, 30 days without seeing another person. Even going skiing, you go up to ski a line, and it's kind of a dangerous line. There's some slough. Things could happen. You're by yourself. You could get knocked off your feet and plowed into a tree. Who knows what could happen? it's really glorious to be alone. It's really clean. And on this trip, I had no other person really that I could communicate with, that I was close to. And that gave me a lot of time to just clean myself out. Like we just said, get rid of the stories, just be in the forest and be observant.
Talk about skiing, Jon. I want to pick up on that just because I think this pod will be out in the fall and people will be starting to get excited for ski season, and hopefully you'll be able to come up to your winter haven up here in British Columbia. But take me back. When did you start skiing, and what was that like? Who did you go with? Did you take to it right away? What were those early days on the slopes like for you?
Oh boy. I bought a pair of wooden skis at the ski shop, whatever, and it didn't have metal edges. So I knew that I wanted metal edges because I wanted to be a rad dude, you know?
Yeah.
So I bought a set of metal edges, but didn't know I was supposed to router them in. So I just screwed them onto the base of the ski so they acted like rails. And we'd climb up to the top of the cow pasture, and there was a stone fence and an opening between it. And we'd head for that opening. And if we missed it, we couldn't turn. We just have to bail just before we hit the stone wall. We climb up and try it again. That was my beginning, okay?
Nice. What year was that, or what decade?
Oh, 1837 or something. No, I was born in 1945, and maybe I was 7, so put that at 1952.
Right. And that was it. After that, you were hooked?
Well, no, I played hockey.
Right.
And I was a hockey player, and excuse the expression, I thought skiing and skiers was kind of a sissy sport, you know?
Yeah.
Real men played hockey. And then my mother bought me a pair of skis, a pair of 215 head GSs, as stiff as a 2x4, and sent me out to the slopes. And wow, all of a sudden this was more fun than hockey.
Yeah. Well, maybe some of it is that solo, right? You're out there on your own. You don't have to rely on anyone else to get into the flow of it. You mountain bike most of your summers, you ski most of your winters. You talk about always having an affinity for the people that sort of, you know, the nomads and the wanderers and the people that live in trailers and the dirtbags. And I know you've got kids. I just wondered, were you stepping off that sort of planned cultural conveyor belt, you know, that everyone else goes on even before you had the kids, or was that something that you really embraced afterwards?
Oh boy, that's a good question. It's been off and on all my life. I went along and got a Ph.D. in organic chemistry. So that's very establishment, very nose to the grindstone sort of thing. At the same time, I've always kind of felt myself counterculture, and that's a bit of a fine line, you know, what you are and what you think you are. It's the stories in your head again. But when we had kids, and, you know, I don't know if I was a good parent or a bad parent, but we lived in a teepee and moved around in the mountains and hiding out from the Forest Service and stuff. And that was going on while I was in graduate school. So the left side of my face, I was in graduate school and playing the game according to the rules. And the right side of my face, I was living in a teepee and hiding from the Forest Service. So I guess it's been back and forth all my life. I've never been a real hippie living in Haight-Ashbury and doing 5 hits of acid a week. I've never done that. But at the same time, I look at the real world and I look at the commitments that people make to be establishment and the dues one has to pay to get all the accoutrements of civilization that you're supposed to have. And I go, that doesn't seem like that much fun either.
Yeah, I felt like in this book there was a definite sense of that. I mean, I certainly came out of the book and was like, okay, like how much of this stuff around me do I really need? And I feel like whether that was intentional or not, you definitely insert a good thread of that sort of way of thinking into this book. As you mentioned, you've sort of had this double life, and you were in the academic world, and you wrote the first environmental textbooks and all this. For your serious adventuring, your big epic paddles, or your bike trips, your circumnavigations of islands and stuff. It seems like that happened more in the second half of your life. Were you doing these kind of large expeditions when you were in your 20s and 30s, or was that more education focused those days?
Well, I was in graduate school till I was 27, and then I came out and I had this vision of myself as wanting to be an adventurer, but I didn't have any of the skills. I had this vision of myself as wanting to live out in the woods, but I didn't know how to sharpen a chainsaw. So I had spent my whole life in this one direction, and I didn't have the skill sets to go in the other direction. I was still skiing on my 215 head GS's, black steel skis. So it took me a number of years to learn the skill sets I needed to be the person I wanted to be. And then my first several expeditions all ended in catastrophic failure. So I had never been in a kayak, right? And I said, it's my first kayak trip. I'm going to go paddle solo around Cape Horn. Well, this is a very stupid thing to do. I had no skills. I didn't know how to do it. In the end, I crashed in the ocean where the confluence of the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Antarctic Ocean, a very tempestuous piece of water. I flipped over in the surf. My boat broke in half. I dislocated my shoulder. I lost all my gear. I was on an uninhabited stretch of coastline on the edge of the Antarctic Ocean, freezing cold, hypothermic, dislocated shoulder. And it suddenly dawned on me, I'm in over my head.
Yeah.
And so gradually I started learning how to do things and not being dead. I had a choice. I either had to stop what I'm doing, learn what I'm doing, or I was going to die. And I decided I didn't want to stop, so I had to get the skill sets. And this went on for several expeditions. I had a number of catastrophic and epic failures where I just was in over my head. And then I got it together, and I've had a long, very successful record since then. But yeah, I didn't really get going until I was in my mid-30s. And, that's what my life was. So that's what it is. That's who I am. That's what happened.
Yeah. So for the listeners out there, I mean, some of those adventures you just talked about are in the book Cold Oceans, which I don't see on your website, Jon. Is that one out of print, or do they have to go dig for that one in used bookstores?
Yeah, it's in print. It's on Amazon. It's more of a linear adventure story.
Yeah.
And what happened is, I was trained to be successful. My mother wanted me to be successful. My father wanted me to be successful. I went to graduate school where success was measured in how many academic papers you have and all that mumbo jumbo. So I started off in the adventure world, and I was linear. You pick an objective, you get a sponsor, you get the money to do the trip, you complete the trip, you write an article, you get famous, and that's a career. So I went on like that for a while, and then I ended up in the book Raven's Gift. I ended up in Siberia in this small village And this old shaman, 96 years old, born during the reign of Tsar Nicholas II, lived through the entire rise and fall of the Soviet Empire. And she's a healer in the old way. She was born in a skin tent. She stands about 4'11" tall. She looks at me in the eyes and she says to me, "Come back.
Yeah.
It will be good if you do." And I spent the next 5 years back and forth, in and out in this village. And all of a sudden, all of my sponsors dropped me like a hot potato. "What are you doing, Jon? You're not doing the next big thing. You're hanging out with this old shaman woman. You're walking around in the tundra and you're not doing anything, quote, significant, close quote." But she changed my life. And then you start approaching your wilderness ventures. It changes everything and nothing. So after all this time of essentially retiring from extreme adventures, I said, I'm going to come back, but with the power that the shaman woman gave me. And now I'm 65 years old, and I'm going to do the hardest thing I've ever set out to do, which was to circumnavigate Ellesmere, something that 20 years ago I looked at and said, I can't do it. It's impossible. I'm not strong enough. And now I can recombine everything, and it's subtle. Yeah, I had a goal. I wanted to circumnavigate Ellesmere Island with Eric Boomer, and it was really important because rescue was sort of impossible out there.
Right.
So once you set out, you were kind of committed. But to do it with the attitude of living in the now, not living in the future, it's the same thing. You put one foot in front of the other, one ski in front of the other, one paddle stroke after another. But the way your head is oriented, not towards thinking of the goal, thinking of my sponsors are going to like me and they're going to give me money and all that mumbo jumbo, but to be there and to handle every barrier, every obstacle as if it didn't exist, as if it was just the flow of time. And then that expedition, which I did when I was 65, and we were honored by being chosen as one of the top 10 adventure teams of the world for that year.
Yeah, by National Geographic.
That expedition, by National Geographic, thank you. But that expedition, for the day-to-day of that expedition, was the most joyous of anything I've ever done in my life.
And I mean, that expedition is covered in the book Crocodiles and Ice. And, you know, your time with the shaman in Kamchatka is the Raven's Gift. And I remember speaking to you about, it feels like the Raven's Gift was sort of a turning point for your writing style as well, and probably for your expedition style, where, you know, people were giving you a hard time for, you know, writing about consciousness and writing about shamanism and all this stuff that I think at the time there weren't that many adventurers kind of dipping their toes into those waters. And I know you said you got a bit of blowback on the Raven's Gift book, even though, I mean, personally, it's my favorite adventure book I've ever read. But then when you came back with the after that trip with Boomer and the next book, you drifted it into a bit more hard science, I think, for Crocodiles and Ice, but also you still kept that consciousness and revolution stuff. Am I correct in that, or was that just a natural thing, or was the Crocodiles and Ice book an answer to the critics from the Raven's Gift book that weren't down with the shamanism and stuff?
Yeah, I don't feel I was answering the critics. I feel I was trying to write what's from my heart. And in this newest book, Tracking Lions, Myth and Wilderness in Samburu, I just let everything go. I said, I'm going to just write exactly what I wanted to say all my life and not worry about what happens. And Don Gorman at Rocky Mountain Books read the proposal, and 20 minutes later, I got an email back And it came so fast, I thought it's got to be a rejection. Nobody accepts the proposal after 15 minutes. I saw it and I went, oh, darn, a rejection. And I looked and he said, we want the book. And it was such this great feeling that finally I could write, not worrying about, it's like the expeditions, not worrying about whether you're successful, but saying what's from your heart. And you think about great musicians or great artists of any kind. I'm not saying that I'm great, but you're saying that at a certain point in your life, you stop writing for the money. You write this is the last thing I'm going to say. This is from my heart.
Yeah. And the book's going to come out in September, right? And I know you said
correct.
There was the Rocky Mountain was pretty keen on the draft that you handed in. There wasn't much that they needed to go over or anything.
Well, we went through the regular editorial process.
Right.
I was honored and pleased. They're putting in a 24-page folio of color photos. That came as a shock.
Oh, yeah.
I've never had that kind of positive treatment in a book.
Yeah, that's gonna be exciting.
Now it's got to go out in the world and people are going to like it or not like it. I think they're going to like it.
No, so do I. Especially, fans of your other books. It's an obvious continuation of, your story and who you are. So as far as, it's been... You were able to work out a few chapters with the magazine as well through the column with Mountain Life. Some of the stuff in this book we'd seen before, or we'd touched on before at least, right? Obviously not word for word, but was that a bonus to be able to have sort of an ongoing little place where you could send words as you were working on this big project?
Pete, I really enjoyed working for you, with you. I really enjoyed writing for Mountain Life. Yeah, I take you give me a theme and then I go back into my life or into the present and I pull bits and pieces out of various books in my Mountain Life articles and try to recraft them in a slightly different way. But that's fun, and it's fun to get feedback from you and very encouraging because I figure if you like it, then all the other dirtbags in the world will like it. That's meant to be a compliment.
Yeah, well, I mean, we hold dirtbags in high reverence up here for sure. And I mean, speaking on that, we're coming out of this global pandemic, which, that's a whole wormhole of the implications of that. It changed the way that a lot of us had to live. You had to spend a winter not skiing, just biking. You were living out of your van, which, it's a lot of people's dream nowadays, it seems. How was it for you to miss a winter and to get back out there and just be 12, 16 months of biking?
Yeah, I've skied all my life. And so originally it was a bit of a disappointment, but it's the whole living in the now. If you're skiing a really cool powder line on this gully, you're not skiing a really cool powder line on the other gully, you can't get worried about that. If you're having fun mountain biking, you can't get worried that you're not having fun doing something else. I really enjoyed spending 6.5 months camping out in the van in the desert. It was transformational in just being mostly out of civilization. We went into town to get food, of course.
Yeah.
But just living out there and watching the sun come up and the sun go down, dark times. It wasn't real cold because it's south, but it's still dark times. It was wonderful. And getting the feel of my bike, it was great.
Jon, while you were doing that, I mean, we personally stayed in pretty good touch. Obviously, you were out there, but you weren't cut off. Do you think the technology nowadays makes for a better dirtbag van living lifestyle, or do you think that connectivity takes away from it a little bit still?
I don't know. I hear your question.
I mean, it's
the
easier.
world we live in, man.
Yeah.
It's easier. I was able to keep up with the book production and so on and so forth. I can remember the days when I'd pull up a chair and a table and go to a phone booth and with a bunch of quarters and do my business. And before that, of course, there were no phones. It's the era that we live in, and I know all this movement, connect to disconnect and all of that, and that's all. It's a tool. It's like a shovel or whatever, a quill pen. It's a tool you use, and I'm not going to make any great philosophical comments about our technological age.
When you're out there, how often are you running into, younger people that are doing a similar thing, or are you meeting lots of kids out on the road? Is the dirtbag sort of lifestyle seem vibrant still for the younger generations?
I was kind of shocked and disappointed at how few people we met.
Right.
We'd go out in the desert and we wouldn't see anybody. We'd go out with a week's worth of food and we wouldn't see anybody for a week. Or you'd see somebody on the trail and you'd say, hi, how are you? I got one person behind me, and that was the conversation.
Yeah.
So, I was surprised. We thought we'd be in these little caravans of people and riding together and talking around campfires and singing Boy Scout songs and stuff, but that really didn't happen. It was mostly me and Nina.
Yeah, we wonder about that a lot up here, me and my buddies. We're guys in our 40s, and a lot of these people that are, some of them are still kicking around Whistler and the Sea to Sky, but they literally left their last exam in high school, jumped in a van with a buddy or in a hatchback or whatever, and drove right to the mountains and started a new life. That was as soon as they possibly could. And we were starting to wonder and worry, like, are there still those kids that are driven, with the cost of the lifestyle and the other options? And I'm not sure if we're seeing that as much or even at all, where, the kids are dropping everything and moving to the mountains and figuring out their new life at age 17, 18, throwing caution into the wind. It's, I think there's a fear that in the ski culture, anyhow, I think there's still plenty of dirtbags in rock climbing, but in the ski culture, there's a bit of fear that some of that may be getting lost.
That would be a shame. That would be really bad. I mean, I grew up in the hippie era, back in Boulder, Colorado in the late 1960s, early 1970s. And there was really a glorious feeling that we could change the world into free love, non-consumerism, peace, love, bro. And the more I could see of that, the better I would feel. I don't see as much of it as I would like to see, but who knows what the younger generation is doing. It's not my job to figure that out.
Yeah, mine neither. I mean, you're always curious, but at the same time, it's a big world out there, and there's definitely corners that we'll never see. So who you're right, who knows?
But let me add something to that. I wrote a chapter in Tracking Lions called To Flush a Toilet. And I started off the chapter saying, I never thought in my life I was going to write a chapter called To Flush a Toilet. And it's all about these, I was staying at this camp and these German eco-tourists. And I say that with a laugh and a hearty har, and what the hell? Eco-tourists, and they were all 17-ish, and they were coming to the camp to participate, to be a tourist in Samburu land, and they couldn't do it unless they had flush toilets. And
right.
So it was my job and the other people's job to get the toilets flushed. And that made me really sad, man.
Yeah, and there's a chapter about
Yeah.
how they couldn't carry their own luggage, or they didn't expect to have to carry their own luggage.
Exactly. And look, we're overusing the planet. And one way to use it less is simply to expect less, fewer conveniences. And one of the great stories, we started talking about mythologies and stories. The mythologies that gave us power in the Stone Age have been hijacked by politicians, by advertising executives, by people that tell us a story that you have to shit in a bucket of clean water when you're in the desert in a place where it hasn't rained in 3 years. And people believe those stories. And I would really like to see a world where we didn't believe those stories, where we could go out and live in the desert and just kind of break free. Like you said, the 17-year-old dirtbags. So it's not just a kind of a philosophical thing, oh, I'd like to see some hippies around. It's what's happening to the planet, and it keeps exploding, that we're using too much and expecting too much, and that's a great tragedy.
Yeah, and I mean, we have a saying up here, you know, where I live in one of the busiest sort of outdoor tourism zones, probably in North America, you know, and we have eco-tourists, we have super, super rich people. And the thinking is, you know, you can't expect somebody to care about the natural world unless they're able to see why it's worth caring about. And I don't know if it's the marketing departments, but, you know, they feel like people coming out here on any front, whether they're an eco-tourist, whether they can carry their own backpack, whether they're a dirtbag, to get them into that nature is going to be a good thing in the long run. But I'm not exactly sure that the end goal is actually being attained there. I think there are a lot of people that come in and experience quote unquote nature, and they don't really leave with a better understanding of it. And I think that's, you know, that's dangerous, because they're leaving an impact, but they're not gaining a better understanding. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. This pandemic has really increased the amount of people that have gotten into camping and outdoor stuff. And, you know, we're watching the garbage go up. We're watching the trails get degraded. So it's going to be interesting to see if the power of the nature can break through those, you know, this is mine, I'm the conqueror sort of mindset that seems to be out there. And I don't know if it's a lot, but it's definitely a noticeable minority or a noticeable segment. So it's tough to say what's going to happen, but I don't know. What do you think about that? Can we just count on nature to save us all? Or do we have to be open to it? Like, it seems like there's people that aren't open to it.
Oh man, well said, Feet. Yeah, I don't know. I do know if you sat in a canoe with me, I just said this, for 3 weeks and we floated down a river in the Barren Lands, that it would be different than if you come to Whistler and go ski the lifts. That's a different experience.
Certainly,
okay? That's
certainly
quantitative.
And if you had to shit in a hole in the ground for 3 days, you probably wouldn't need to shit in a bucket of fresh water anymore, right? Like, I think people can learn quickly if they're forced to.
I hope so. Evolution, we have X number of millions of species. You just turned me on to a book about fungi and mycelium that have been around for a couple of billion years. And this experiment, evolutionary experiment in big brains, has only been tried once on this planet. And big brains are real good at predicting things and telling stories and building rocket ships, but I don't know if big brains is a real long-term solution to survival. Right.
Yeah, and I guess we're on the tail end of finding out. It sometimes feels like.
I just glad I'm not my grandkids' ages.
Yeah. Well, Jon, I mean, one of the things that you do talk about in here, obviously lots about storytelling, lots about big brains, kind of how we got here, the stories that unified us. But also there's a thing about beauty, and you just talk about, how there is something instinctually in us to appreciate a sunset, or, when you get to the top of a mountain and you see this vast, wide, scenic thing that lets you realize the size of it out there. The beauty of nature seems to be hardwired into the human condition. How do you think that plays going forward? The fact that sunsets are universal, right? Sunrises are universal. It doesn't even matter whether you're in a city or in nature. You kind of stop and appreciate them.
Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you. Yes, beauty is universal across cultures, and the beauty of nature, it is hardwired into us. The problem that we're dealing with is that tribalism is also hardwired into us. So if somebody on the television says, join the Pepsi generation, that means join the tribe. We have a tribe for you, and all you have to do is buy a Pepsi, and you're a member of the tribe. And this competes with the cleanliness of nature, which is non-tribal. And
Right.
I see it as this great competition. Nature is there, and beauty is there, and our innate appreciation of beauty is in there, but we also want to join the Pepsi generation. So there's a struggle, and yeah.
Yeah, and of course, if you're part of the Pepsi generation, that means by default that you're not part of the Coke generation, right? And screw those guys over there. We're over here and they're over there, and that sort of us versus them you talk about in the book has been going on, for a long time in human history.
Yeah, and in chimpanzee history as well.
Right. So the stories we tell, I guess, hey, John? And this last story of yours, whether it is in fact your last or not, is a hell of a good one. So when's the book coming out? September?
September 3rd. It might be a week or so after, but before it gets to the bookstores. But it'll be there. You can keep track on my website, jonturk.net. And let's hit the hard notes hard. The bad notes hard.
Well, there we go. Yeah. Like John said, it's jonturk.net. You can learn all about the book there. Obviously, I always recommend getting the book from a local bookseller if you can, but if you can get it straight from John, that's even better. I try to avoid the big companies if possible. And of course, John also has most of his previous books are on his website as well. The Raven's Gift, Crocodiles on Ice, In the Wake of Joman, all fantastic expedition, adventure, philosophy, consciousness, just really, really strong reads. So John, I appreciate your time here. I think we'll wind her down. One last question. Obviously, you're going to keep submitting your column to the Mountain Life just because this is your last book. You're not done with writing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I love working for you guys. I have never had a job, if you can call it a job, of any kind that I have enjoyed working at more than working for Mountain Life, more than being a part of Mountain Life. And no, you got me until I'm too old and decrepit. I'm on.
There we go. I couldn't have asked for a better testimonial. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Again, the book is called Tracking Lions, Myth, and Wilderness in Samburu, jonturk.net. We'll catch up with you guys next week. All right, well, there we go. Hey, listen, don't let the door hit your ass on your way out to buy Jon Turk's new book. And while you're out there, get all of his books. Wow, what a great time. What an excellent conversation. Thank you, John, for doing that. And thank you, dear listener, for doing your listening. Obviously, a podcast is no good without any listeners, and we appreciate you giving your time to us and giving your energy to living it up with Mountain Life. And, of course, we appreciate Shirai Rules for laying down the voiceovers at the beginning, and
our old friend Adrian Gendro for the music. Thanks to both of them. Other than that, please stay tuned. We're going to be back living it up with mountain life in probably a couple weeks, or maybe 3, or who knows. We're keeping it loose. But I think we're going to do Brett Tippie next. We recorded it a while ago. I know I said we were going to do him next last time, but I think I mean it this time. I'm pretty sure. I'm at least 47% sure. And that's almost a passing grade. So tune in to find out. And in the meantime, be sure to hit up mountainlifemedia.ca. That'll tell you actually who's going to be on the next pod, and it'll also tell you a bunch of other stuff. Thanks for your time. Have a beautiful day, beautiful night, beautiful whatever it is that you're having. Just keep it beautiful.